And I asked him if, because he writes with, it doesn't feel like there's any ego at all in his writing. So I asked him, I said, please be honest with me. Do you have ego when you write? He says, absolutely. And he says, if I didn't hear ego, I don't know if I'd be able to wake up in the morning. So that's, but that's why Rosh Hashanah, that's why there's so few Jews.
Yeah.
It's the most difficult religion.
Yeah.
It asks for the impossible.
Yeah.
And we love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the fact that it's unbelievably difficult. Because it's not the attainment that's going to make me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's the constant search, the constant working towards that attainment. Mm-hmm. So I will never be able to nullify my ego. But I like knowing that I always have to work on it. So that's the second level, what Chaim Seidler-Feller calls the refinement of character. In fact, I studied Chassidus with the Chabad Rabbi in Montreal for 2 years, every week on the phone. And then finally, I asked him, I said, what are we really doing here? And he told me the three most powerful words I've heard in terms of learning Torah. He says, Chassidut refines your character. And there are very few things I could ever speak about that could be as holy as refining a character. And especially when things are so coarse. When you look at the debate that we have today, you look at all the fighting that goes on over Israel, you look at the brazenness, the chutzpah, the gluttony of human rights, absolute gluttony. So I just spent a month in Israel, and the viciousness of the vocabulary, of the language, is there. And one side of me says, well, that's an extreme demonstration of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
I guess I'm proud of Israel. That sort of you're allowed to do that, and you're free to do that. But that seems to me a very secular view, a very sort of the idea of being obsessed with rights as opposed to obligations. And I think for me, when we talk about the refinement of character that comes with Rosh Hashanah, it comes, to transcend what I'm allowed to do.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to offend, and I'm allowed to insult, and I'm allowed to viciously criticize Israel. I am allowed.
By secular law.
By secular law, I'm completely allowed. But in the Jewish tradition, we go way beyond that. And Rosh Hashanah comes here to tell us to aim higher. Being Jewish means to aim higher. That's what being Jewish means. So then the third thing that moved me in the past week, in terms of preparing my month, was from Rabbi Tov from Bet Jacob.
Yes.
And he spoke last Sunday morning, and his message was one of empowerment. Rabbi Tov is one of these unusual speakers. He's really sweet, but he's full of substance at the same time. And he's very positive. He spoke about how during the Amidah, the silent prayer of the high holidays, there are 4 insertions that we add. And he said that at each insertion, we ask God for just a little bit more. And he said it's not a coincidence that at each insertion, the words of each edition, our identity gets stronger and stronger. At the first insertion, we're anonymous. At the second insertion, we are God's creatures. At the third level, we are the people of the covenant of Sinai. And at the fourth and final level, we are the nation of Israel. We are his special children, which comes with privileges and obligations.
Yeah.
But he says you have a built-in specialness in you.
Yeah.
So in the Pirkei Avot, it says, God loves you so much that he created you in his image. And then he loves you so much that he told you he created you in his image. Second level. So he says that's the empowering message. You have the awe of God that you have at Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah we are crowning God. By the way, a lot of my friends don't believe in God.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of Jews don't believe in God. In fact, more on a percentage basis, more Jews don't believe in God than non-Jews. Even America.
Oh yeah,
What do you propose?
overwhelmingly, yeah,
Right.
overwhelmingly,
So, and normally I'm an extremely live and let live kind of guy.
right.
You know, I'm very respectful. You know, people who come, I use the Dennis Prager argument that I love, which is, you know, I can't prove to you that God exists, but I love to know that God exists. I need to feel that God exists, and for me that works. That's sort of the Dennis Prager view, and I use that all the time. But I must say, for the first time in my life, I'm thinking that for all of you out there who really don't believe in God, if you're ever going to consider it, now's the time.
Yeah,
Rosh Hashanah.
yeah,
Now's the time. And this is as preachy as I'm going to get. But, and again, I'm not even preaching that you should. I'm just saying it's not a bad time to consider it. And it connects to the work that we have to do. If you are all really committed to taking this high holiday period seriously and to really sort of do the complicated work that needs to be done, it really helps to have something that's a lot bigger than us. One of my observations from being in Israel for a month was the difference in consciousness of being here and being in Israel, especially being in the advertising business for 20 years.
yeah,
There's a consciousness here of exaggerating.
yeah,
Everywhere you go, pretty much in America,
yeah,
you're exposed to exaggeration. You know, the hamburger on the billboard is always going to look better than the real thing. You know, whether it's a toothpaste or whether it's a political candidate, we live in a society of exaggeration, of over the topness, of dominating your subject. Even your humor. You look at David Letterman and Jon Stewart. There's a sense of superiority that they have over their subject material.
yeah,
Right? They're almost bigger than their humor. Because God forbid they would have to be smaller than anything. The sarcasm, the smirk, the irony, all those things are tricks of control that create the illusion that you're bigger. You're bigger than the subject, you're bigger than everything, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you come to Jerusalem, and you see something that's 2,000 years old, that hasn't changed in 2,000 years. You realize that you are now in the place where a story that's 5,000 years old has started. And you say to yourself, how in the hell am I bigger than this? So you live as being smaller than something in Israel. And it hit me this year more than any other year. So Rosh Hashanah, part of the work of Rosh Hashanah, of self-correction, it's very hard to do the work of self-correction unless you feel smaller than something else. There's a certain security and comfort and strength that you get from being smaller than something else.
mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of pressure by being always bigger than everything.
Yeah.
So Rosh Hashanah says, you know what? The Rav Soloveitchik said an amazing thing during one of his classes for Rosh Hashanah. He talked about the fear of God. And he said, I'd rather have one really big fear than a whole bunch of small ones.
That's a good point.
So when you believe in God and you understand that you're smaller than God and you have the fear of God, it frees you to have no fear of anything else. It frees you to do the work of correcting yourself. You need to be smaller than something before you can be bigger than something else. And here in America, because we live in a place that's so small,
Mm-hmm.
because commercialism is a small idea. Profit motive is a small idea. It's not a deep spiritual idea that nurtures you. And even, it is a secular society. And the idea of human rights, of basic freedom, is a basic idea. It's not a deep idea like the idea of having a sense of obligation, like the idea of transcending rights and transcending, and looking at the limits of freedom. The limits of freedom is a much bigger idea than freedom itself.
Yeah.
Right? So at Rosh Hashanah, this time of year, you got to be small to really do a great work, to do a great job on yourself. And I have here the 10 questions from my friend, Rabbi Bleich.
Oh, wow. He's a great author.
Yeah, he's a great author. I highly recommend Rabbi Bleich. He's in his 70s, and he might as well be 20 years old. He hasn't lost his boyhood wonder.